And all of this happening while there are reports now indicating the West has indeed been providing some fighter jets and helicopters to Ukraine, something that the country has asked for. Of course, 800 million, the latest addition in munitions. We could hear more about that tomorrow. As Kelly Meyer mentioned just a few moments ago, President Biden scheduled to give an update on the war tomorrow morning. That will likely come up. And he also said this today about the Ukrainians.
I knew they were tough and proud, but I tell you what, they're tougher and more proud than I thought. I'm amazed what they're doing with your help in terms of providing advice and the weaponry we're providing, along with the rest of NATO.
It never gets old, Leland, talking about the resiliency of the Ukrainian forces, and they are really up against some of their toughest battles yet when you look at what's happening in Mariupol right now and also on the eastern side of the country.
Yeah, and you talked about the resilience of the Ukrainian fighters very, very well. We're now 50-plus days in, and this is basically the only area that's left of the Ukrainian resistance here inside Mariupol, and there is no way for them to get supplies in. There's no way for them to get their wounded out. This down here is the Sea of Azov, and the Azov Iron and Steel Works is the only area that's left. So the Russians have them surrounded and are able to just keep pounding away at the Ukrainians here. As they said, it's only a matter of time until the Russians succeed in that. We'll head now to a larger area of the east, and this is where now all the fighting is happening. And you can see here we're fighting all of these purple dots as the Ukrainians are on the defensive and the Russians are trying to put out. This is Luhansk, and the People's Republic of Luhansk, which is what Vladimir Putin recognized right before the beginning of this war, now goes like this, and the Russians have about 80 to 90% of it already secured. So you're talking about them pushing just not very far here. Kramatorsk is going to be your main battle. There's a large Ukrainian contingent here, about 20,000 troops. But if the Russians are able to close this and pinch them in, what's happening to those thousands of Ukrainians in Mariupol is going to be the same thing that happens here. Want to bring in retired Air Force Major Glenn Ignazio with that to begin the conversation. Tell us, we've heard this anecdotally that there's going to be a couple of additional helicopters sent in, a couple of additional MiG fighter planes for the Ukrainians to fly. Are they at the point where they're able to really use this air power effectively against the Russians, especially in what is essentially Russian home turf now?
Yeah, anything that they can have or anything they can get is definitely important. I mean, the helicopters will be a couple of things. To one, get people out. Second, to do air assaults to bring troops in, and at the same time, if they're attack helicopters, to be able to actually engage them, engage the enemies. Now, the fighter thing, that's a really interesting that's happened, and it's actually changed in the first couple hours. Even today, is that Secretary of State Kirby said earlier that there's fighters being sent from NATO. We're supporting them with parts. Then there was a flip saying, well, no, we're not sending fighters, but we're sending parts and so forth back to it. Ukraine says we are getting fighters. Some of the countries that are supposedly supplying it saying they're not. So it's really interesting about what's happening. But I'll tell you one thing is that the Ukrainian military, any kind of fighter aircraft that they can get will literally give them that air dominance that they need from the Russian military. And the Su-34 is the fifth generation, most advanced fighter in the Russian inventory, and 4 have been taken down in Ukraine already. So the Ukrainians really need those types of aircraft, and I'm really, really concerned about what is really going on right now, just like the Ukrainians must be.
Yeah, Kirby at the Pentagon, the spokesman there, you have to think that there's sort of this idea of ambiguity, right, of plausible deniability, because the Poles, if they were going to give fighter jets, they didn't want it coming from them, so magically these planes might show up in Ukraine. You've flown in these sort of really contested areas of airspace. It's MH17s that the Ukrainians are getting. But just in terms of the supply lines now, it is shifted, right? Because all the supplies come in here just outside of a NATO base in Poland. They come through Lviv, and then they go out to Kyiv. They come down to Odessa, where they perhaps are going to get some anti-ship missiles, and then they come out to the east. These are the most vulnerable supply lines, and you're heading right into the teeth of the Russian forces. Even contested airspace, the supply convoys have to be target number 1 for the Russians, right?
Yes, they definitely are. From what we saw before, you saw the Russians' logistics train being completely stretched, and they were getting clobbered. This new general coming in, he's a lot smarter. He's bringing together what we call multi-domain warfare, using airspace and ground assets together, and the intelligence to really carry things out. When they brought back to the border, they've organized very well, and now they're pushing together and creating a very good front. You've also watched more bombers and missiles going off further to the west, which is starting to strike the actual logistics chain that the Ukrainians have been relying on. We talked, I believe it was last week, about the tactical fighters can't get there. The long-range bombers and the missiles can. They have a high fail rate, but the idea of impacting the Ukrainian logistics chain really hasn't happened before and is going to start now, because the man is actually a lot smarter than the generals he had out there before.
You talked about missiles. The Russians today launched this ICBM they call Satan II in a test. You've got to be an idiot or a fool to believe in coincidences here of this being a message yet again from Vladimir Putin of, nuclear weapons are still an option here. They say that this can evade all of the U.S. current missile defense systems. Is there anything that we saw in this ICBM launch that was different, that would actually prove what Vladimir Putin's claiming?
No, other than the marketing is really good. But, with the START treaty, or Strategic Arms Reductions Treaty, they have to notify us before they launch a missile, so we know it's not real. We do the same thing. We actually canceled 2 of our missile tests, this week and a couple weeks ago, so it didn't get misunderstood as what we're doing. So this missile takes off. It's supposed to carry more warheads. These are called MIRVs, which means multiple independent reentry vehicles. Those are basically 4, 5, or even up to 10 is what they're saying, warheads. So one missile can actually hit 10 separate targets. What he's saying is that once these warheads get into the atmosphere coming in, that they can roam around and so forth. That's the hypersonic technology, and we haven't really seen them do that best, even with the missiles that they say they have. So to say that really could carry, could actually work, I'm not so clear about that. But we also have an incredible ballistic missile defense system that we focused on in the United States, and its job is to take out any kind of ICBM like this.
Yeah, on the other hand, you probably wouldn't want to have to find out the hard way whether or not he was telling the truth or not. Major, we appreciate it. Important to note that there's some interesting stuff in the Wall Street Journal. I'll talk with Marnie about that. Major, thank you very much. And